Greetings, sisters and brothers, and welcome to a tight production of Each One Teach Two. I am your host, Talib Muhammad, and I am honored to have you here on this, my very first video. After many years of coaxing by my family members and friends and colleagues and neighbors, I finally decided to put together a collection of videos sharing with you some of the things that I've been fortunate enough to have learned throughout my years and throughout my travels. We're going to touch on primarily history, but also politics, finance, social issues, or anything else you deem important for us to discuss. So with no further ado, let us move forward with our very first episode of Each One Teach Two. Well, sisters and brothers, when I first embarked about making this series of videos, I had to come up with an idea as to what would be the very first subject matter that we would address. There's so many things, there's such a myriad of subjects, it took me a little time to decide what exactly to talk about first. So I eventually decided to start at the beginning. Let's start with our elders. Let's start with the individuals who dedicated their lives for our spiritual, mental, academic, philosophical edification. Those who wrote books and did lectures and traveled throughout the world, bringing the true story about Black history, African history, Egyptian history, and American history, so that we could better round out our comprehension of the truth instead of the lies our teachers told us. Now, over the years, I've had many people ask me, Talib, where did you hear all this stuff? Where did you learn about this? What book could I read? What author could I follow? Well, the truth of the matter is, there is no one book you can read that's going to provide you with the information that you'll need in order to broaden your horizons successfully regarding the history of our people. There are so many authors, so many subject matters, that it's impossible to find one book that's going to provide you with what you may want. Now, on the backdrop of our video, I have a collection of books from my library. Some of them you may very well be familiar with, and some of them you may not. In any event, zoom in on them, look at the titles, do a Google search, do some research on them, and these books will link you into other forms of literature that will enhance your comprehension of our history. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to start with our elders. We're going to start with the individuals who dedicated their lives to us to educate us and rise our consciousness. Did I say rise our consciousness? Raise our consciousness. So we're going to move on and we're going to begin the initiation of acknowledging some of our ancestors, some of our scholars, some of our academic powerhouses. And in no particular order, we're going to initiate it with the great Ivan van Sertima.
There are so many evidences apart from the question of what the Greeks said who actually saw these Egyptians, apart from all the evidence that Cheikh Anta Diop has brought forward and others. There is evidence, the migration, the movement of agriculture, every major plant in Egypt. At least half a dozen are found coming from the south. There's not a single plant that comes down to the south. This nonsense about civilization, that civilization in Egypt was created by Asiatics and Caucasoids, and then they brought the light of civilization down to the benighted black barbarians in the south. Not a single shred of evidence. The script comes up, the agriculture comes up, all the symbols comes up, the conceptions of God, and all the various forms that were to become deities in Egypt. It all comes from the south. The art, everything, you can see its origin in the south, in that Ethiopian and Sudanic world. And Tarseti is the culmination, it's the capping of the evidence.
Now, Ivan van Sertima wrote many, many books in his lifetime, and I will probably do a biography on him and a few of our other scholars as to how they've been misrepresented throughout history, specifically on the internet, and even more specifically on sites like Wikipedia. So next we're going to acknowledge another powerhouse, the great and incomparable Dr. Ben-Jochannan.
We did not know that Christianity came from Egypt, Egypt, and that the first monastery was on the island of Philae, which is still there now, and that the Christianity went into Ethiopia and all of North Africa, where they had 7 patriarchs and 27 bishops before the first one in Greece or Rome. We knew nothing about that. We didn't know. Up to now, you got black people sending missionaries to Africa, not knowing that the Coptic church is older than the Roman church. We still send missionaries. We still tell lies about Africans eating the missionaries. I wish we did eat the missionaries, then we would have had no problem. But we still got that. This, as I told you, the worst part of our enslavement is not the shackle on the hand, it's the shackle on the mind. Look, remember this, that the slave master doesn't train his slave to be free.
Now, Dr. Ben was unchallenged in his greatness. Dr. Ben was something else. There are so many videos of him online you can find. He's not only one of the most brilliant scholars of antiquity, of ancient Kemet, Egypt, and Africa collectively. He's humorous. He's funny. He's down to earth. He's real. Amazing individual. Taught people for over 60 years in this country. And once again, do not research Dr. Ben through Wikipedia. We'll address that later. Another scholar at the very highest echelons within our community was the great Professor John Henrik Clark.
Until we understand that on site, the African invited the European for dinner. That's the first thing he did. The Indian invited the European for dinner. The Polynesians invited the European for dinner. Now, if you invite people for dinner, first place, you've got plenty dinner, and you have a society that is traditionally hospitable to strangers. The Indians invited Christopher Columbus for dinner, the first thing they did. All right, now let's look at what was happening inside of Christopher Columbus's mind, and we can go to his own diary for this. He said, I wonder why they're so friendly. They'll be easier to conquer than I thought they would be. I wonder why they're bringing such small amounts of gold. I wonder where the mines are. His intentions were not good. It wasn't good then. The intentions are not good now. And the black man is still hung up with this dinner invitation, this kindness, with the thought that if you treat a person humanely, that he will act humanely toward you.
Now, Professor Clark always had a saying that I really liked. Whenever he was encountered with someone who would attempt to debate him on African history, he would respond by simply saying, I only debate my equals. All others I teach. Truly one of the great ones. The next brilliant scholar we're going to encounter is going to be Chancellor Williams. Now, Chancellor Williams is not as known as some of the other scholars, with the exception of his incredible book, The Destruction of Black Civilizations. So, no further ado, one of the rare videos we can find on the great Chancellor Williams.
Ancient African civilization was, first of all, the beginning of civilization. I found out that there could be no record found anywhere that antedates the advanced civilization of Africa. And this was the finding of European and other scholars. And they were now gradually admitting it, and when the evidence became overwhelming, the question arose, could Africans have achieved all this? Could Africans have achieved this remarkable work in architecture that could be traced back for thousands of years before Christ, before Western civilization had even started? Could Africans have done this? Could Africans have achieved this high advance in mathematics, in physics, in chemistry? In Africa, you'll find that back from times immemorial, they had their own system of democracy. And it was this same system which could be found in every part of the African continent. The same fundamental laws, the same fundamental customs. No matter whether they were 5,000 miles apart, no matter whether the group had never come across the other group, they had the same system. That's why we know that we were dealing with substantially one people. So that democracy then was so long, so many thousands of years before Greece, that the mention of Greece in connection with where democracy began could only bring smiles to the face of any scholar who has really studied world history.
Now, Chancellor Williams had a follow-up book to his great The Destruction of Black Civilizations. That book was called The Rebirth of African Civilizations. Both writings are essential reading material for anyone seeking to ascertain a better comprehension of African history. Our next scholar is the great John G. Jackson. Brother Jackson wrote over a dozen books, taught in various universities throughout the country, and lectured from sea to shining sea. So, here we are with the great John G. Jackson.
Back in 1934, an English historian named Arnold J. Toynbee wrote a study in history, a history of the world in 12 volumes. Don't try, if you find the book in the library, don't try to read it, because one of the hardest books to read is Karl Marx's Capital, and he was an even worse writer than Marx was. That's a record. Toynbee says there have been 21 civilizations in the world. So many were created by the white race, so many by the yellow race, so many by the brown race, so many by the red race. The black race has not created one civilization. None at all. We have done nothing. So I was giving a lecture in New York, and somebody says, well, didn't Toynbee know that Egyptians were black people? I says, Toynbee says they were white people. You see, if you are a racist historian, you don't have any regard for the facts at all.
Now, Brother Jackson was along in years when he conducted this lecture. And as you can see, he hadn't lost any of his chops. Our next and final scholar for today is an individual who's one of the early pioneers in the efforts to supplant the previously accepted European accounts of African history. Upon presenting his research and evidence, he exposed the bias and far too often racist perceptions of even the most renowned and most accepted European scholars on the subject matter. This individual is the great Cheikh Anta Diop. Now, Cheikh Diop spoke French. He also spoke his native language of Senegal, which was, I think it's pronounced Wolof, and he understood English. In this video, he has a translator because English was not his first tongue. And so although he understood it, and you'll see him correcting his translator from time to time, he preferred to speak French. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce to you those who may not know this great man, the incomparable Cheikh Anta Diop.
Voilà, les Égyptiens anciens ressemblaient à cette terre que vous voyez. Voilà, les Égyptiens anciens ressemblaient à cette terre que vous voyez. Voici le premier roi de la terre.
Here you have the first king of the earth, the very first. And the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, looked like this man.
Cet homme a des traits, si vous voulez, plus, comme nous disons, vous m'aviez dit tout à l'heure de ne pas employer un terme, mais sur le plan scientifique, c'est un terme consacré. En tout cas, il a des traits de la race noire plus marqués que celles de presque tous ceux qui sont ici dans cette salle.
You can see that he has those traits that are associated with the black
feature.
Those features associated with the black race, which are even more pronounced than many of the people here. It was this man who unified the Nile Valley from Upper to Lower Egypt, and this was 3,300 years before Jesus Christ.
Yes. Je passe donc, ce que je vais dire avant de passer au suivant, c'est que vous allez le voir donc déjà d'après ses traits et les traits aussi des pharaons qui vont suivre.
You can see by his features and those of the pharaohs and kings that will follow it
que les anciens Égyptiens n'étaient pas des blancs qui seraient devenus progressivement noirs et en perdant leurs traits.
You can see that they were not a people that started as whites and became progressively more black.
Mais qu'au départ, c'était des noirs authentiques qui, à la basse époque, vont se métisser avec des blancs.
They were instead a black people, an authentic black people, but which never ceased to be blacks.
Now, sisters and brothers, the photo at the end of the clip of the great Cheikh Anta Diop was of some of the many books he'd written in his career. And please note, I'm pronouncing his name Diop phonetically. I believe the correct pronunciation was either Diop or Diop. So please forgive my New York accent. Now, during his lifetime, Cheikh Diop studied many subjects, including philosophy and anthropology, physics, and mathematics. Any student of history, specifically African history, must add him to their list of scholars to research. Now, of course, it'd be impossible for me to list every single scholar from our academic community. Clearly, those greats warrant equal recognition. But for the sake of time, I've only highlighted the aforementioned 5, and they'll serve as an introduction to you for your future studies of our great sages. So, sisters and brothers, as we conclude this video, I want to reflect on something I commented on early in regard to researching African/Black history and its respective scholars. I beseech you to please be very careful as to what sources you utilize in your research, specifically sites like Wikipedia. I will address the credibility of websites such as that in my next video and how it relates to African history. Well, sisters and brothers, we at Cheikh Productions would like to thank you for taking the time to watch our presentation. If you enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe. Finally, I leave you with this. True learning is not merely the accumulation of knowledge. It is instead the awakening of our own consciousness. I bid you peace.
We declare our right on this earth to be a man, to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary.